Morning, everybody. Thank you for staying, those who've stayed. And for those of you still in bed, recovering from last night, the least said, the better. Anyway, I hope you've all enjoyed your time here in London the last 3 days. London is described as the world's most culturally diverse city. We have a population of approaching 8.5 million people these days, and it's widely acknowledged that at least 300 languages get spoken in London every day. And over the last 5 or 6 years, those languages have been added to quite considerably by all these ones, as London has emerged as the digital capital of Europe. In fact, computer programming and software development are two of the UK's fastest growing occupations. And they're generally supported by initiatives such as the Mayor of London's Digital Skills Initiative, a partnership that he's done with, put together with London Enterprise Panel, where they're trying to build up a talent pool in England's schools and colleges so that businesses can have tech resource on hand as they graduate. Now, for the US, our US friends in the audience, I'm pleased to tell you that you don't have a monopoly on crazy blonde-haired politicians. Love him or loathe him, our outgoing mayor, Boris Johnson, made a manifesto pledge when he came to office 8 years ago to make London the digital capital of Europe. And amazingly for a politician, he kept his word. And when he moves out of City Hall next month, he'll be able to warmly reflect on a mission well and truly accomplished, as London is definitely today's technology powerhouse of Europe. Pretty much summed up by this quote from Russ Shaw of London Tech Advocates, and his words: "London combines the world-class financial centre of New York, the thriving tech startup culture of Silicon Valley, political and regulatory environment of Washington, and the dynamic entertainment industry of LA, all wrapped up in one city." So let me just put a few headline numbers that support that fact today. London is unquestionably the number one city in Europe for supporting startups and scale-ups. In fact, no other city is probably better equipped for that. VC investment into London is today 10 times more than what it was 5 years ago. And just in the first 9 months of last year, 1.6 billion was raised by tech startups, eclipsing the 1.3 billion that was raised in total in 2014. In total, the tech sector here in London contributes more than 18 billion to the London economy, and employing about 1/3 people and rising. And what's more, of the 17 tech companies in the UK valued at more than £1 billion, of these, 13 of them are based here in London. As I said, it was a mayoral pledge to make London the digital capital of Europe. And just 6 years ago, the Tech City initiative was launched. It was an ambitious project to regenerate a small area, a small enclave of London just north of the city, pretty much centred around Old Street roundabout. It was a pretty ramshackle part of town. Today it is probably the most vibrant part of London, living up to its name and boasting a huge ecosystem of support industries. In fact, one of the biggest industries there is cycle shops, believe it or not, because all these young kids, cycle into work or run into work, unlike me, who Uber or Tube. But cycle shops, stationers, restaurants, cafes, all supported by ubiquitous thousands upon thousands of coffee shops, where pretty much all business is generated. And just one other stat to share with you: London is home to more than 36 accelerators. And many of them are sponsored by large business or by or in partnership with major educational establishments. So attracting talent not just from here in the UK, but London is home to startups from pretty much all over the world. I've been involved with Wayra, the startup that is owned by Telefonica, It opened here in June 2012, and I've been involved pretty much from day one. And in the time that it's been open, it's hosted startups from as far afield as New Zealand, Brazil, Eastern Europe, Ireland. Pretty much every country on the planet has had people come through Wayra's doors in Capper Street. In a short while, we're going to showcase some of the hottest digital businesses that are being accelerated here in London. But first, I'm delighted to call up Orson Stadler, who is the entrepreneur or the investor in residence, I should call him, at Wayra in London. Orson works for Mustard Seed Impact, which are one of the investment firms active here in London. So without any further ado, Orson, I'm going to hand over to you, and then I'll come back and I'll introduce the 5 startups that we've got to talk to you here this morning. So, Orson, all yours.
Firstly, I want to thank Paul for the really kind intro. So I work at Mustard Seed, which is an early stage impact investor. And I guess what I'm going to do today is just give you an overview about why we think London's so exciting, and why, I guess, what we're seeing in the markets and what we're excited to be investing in the next sort of 12 months or so. At some point, the slides might work. There we go. There you go. So that provides you an overview of what I'm going to be talking about today. So, as Paul touched on, we have the city. We have one of the best financial center in the world, and that's, as you've seen with fintech, driving a huge amount of innovation. These are companies that are supporting these small startups, really helping to drive growth within those. And then we come on to the universities, and the universities are a key part of our identity as Mustard Seed. We run university pitching events, at universities all across the world, and in particular in London. And we get exposure to some of the world's most exciting IP. We get exposure to some of the world's best talent. The students coming out of these places are just phenomenal. And we make a few hires from there for our portfolio companies. And then finally, just geographically, Europe is a fantastic place. And London provides entry into that, and also into the US. And I think that's a really key reason why we've been able to lay the foundations for the growth that Paul talks about. And we sort of have the classic VC hockey stick chart. Kind of wish our companies had growth like that. That's just an incredible growth, as you've seen, and to see that rapid growth has been something that we've been really excited to be part of. So then I guess we kind of touch on where has that funding gone in 2015, and I think the first obvious one is fintech. We saw 25% of all funding going into fintech, and I think it's something that we're really excited to be a part of. I'll come on to later as to what effect that's having on the London funding environment, but that's something that we are seeing. We think that will persist into 2016, but it's been a really core part of what Mustard Seed's been looking at last year. I move on to medtech, and medtech's a really interesting place. We made a couple of investments there last year, and I think why that's so exciting is it's really changing the way that consumers or patients are interacting with healthcare, and that fundamental change is something that all those startups that you see up there have had. And I mean, Babylon's obviously one I want to call out there, which had 25 million of funding in 2015. They're playing with the US in terms of size. And then finally was e-commerce. So consumers, again, are deciding what they want, when they want it, and we're seeing incredible growth across that. Obviously, Deliveroo, again, really exciting, $100 million in funding last year. Say what you want about Rocket Internet, but they can grow a big company. So what does that growth mean for entrepreneurs? So I think the first thing is that we're seeing is that foreign capital is really flooding into London at the moment. So as Paul touched on, you're seeing accelerators. You're also seeing big funds. So between Axel and Highland, that's nearly $1 billion of capital flooding into European venture, and based in London. And that's really, really exciting. And then as we discussed with the alternative funding, fintech. So we're seeing everything from crowdfunding to borrowing to lending, which is really driving growth within these companies. And so what does that all mean? I guess it means increased competition for us as investors to access these top entrepreneurs. We're having to be more competitive in terms of support, in terms of everything we do. We're having to be more competitive just to attract them. I think when some of these entrepreneurs turn up, I feel that we're pitching to them more than them to us, and that's probably best exemplified in the valuations. So I mean, for us, we're seeing 10 to 15% uplift from this time last year. We expect that to go up and up, just as there's that competition for access to the best funders. And again, to pull that back to internationalization, London is really a global hub now. You've got people coming across from the US, from Europe, and that variety and that mixture of thought in London is really clear and something that we're really excited to be part of. So then I guess the bit I was most nervous about this presentation was discussing where we're placing our bets for 2016 and where we'll be potentially scaling back positions or not actually making any investments. So AR, VR, we feel that that's a really interesting place. We're seeing a coming of age of that technology, particularly in education. Education's a key area for us, and we think that the ability to provide students experiences and access to learning at a fraction of the cost is really, really exciting. We're also seeing, not just in sort of primary education, I think actually skills training is something we're really, really excited to be part of here. The ability to train skilled workers remotely is something that we're really excited about, and those are just a selection, obviously, of the larger players currently, but we're expecting to see a few more startups there as well. Wearables. So I think wearables went through a period of sort of first-gen syndrome where people were very excited, but effectively we ended up with extensions of our phones. And I think the next step for this will actually be wearables that are untethered from our devices, enabling us to collect data across a whole variety of different inputs, constantly collecting passive data telling us about our lives and about our lifestyles. And those companies that are able to actually take that data and turn that into actionable insights, particularly in health, is something that we're really excited about for this year, and we've got a couple of investments coming up there in that space. And I guess finally, where do we see the loser for 2016 was, I guess, not Uber, but the Uber 4. And that has been probably 20% of the decks we received last year were the Uber 4 something. I think we saw a real detachment from actually what Uber meant and what they stood for. We saw expensive convenience, basically, is what we saw in these businesses. And I think that you're going to see a consolidation in this industry where you end up with a race to the bottom, and the big players are the ones who are going to be able to stomach that lower pricing. And so for us, I think we look at companies that are really going to make a difference, are going to be the winners. The millennial generation, just in the US, is inheriting $30 trillion over the next decade. That generation not only doesn't want their companies to do harm, they really want their companies to do good. A Deloitte study mentions that 47% of millennials expect their companies to connect profit with purpose in some way. And so those are the companies that we look for. Those are the companies that we look to invest for, and the ones that we think will actually be delivering meaningful social outcomes, but also attractive financial performance. So this really resonates with Mustard Seed and our investment philosophy and the way we think about things. We look at 5 key action areas, ranging from economic inclusion, education, environment, family, community, and health. And for each of these, we look to measure the positive social outcomes as aggressively as we look to measure the financial outcomes associated with these companies. For these companies, often revenue is a terrible indicator, a very, very lagging indicator of the success of these companies. So by being able to measure the social impact of these companies, we're actually able to look at the success of these firms way before actually we are able to see that reflected in the top or bottom line. So I guess just to touch slightly on how we think about things is probably the least exciting slide for this, but I was told to put this button in. But so we sourced a variety of deals. So last year we saw in excess of 1,500 ventures. We sourced that through a mixture of our university pitching events, some cold calls, and also referrals from our ventures. And those are the ones which we're most excited about. When they come from our entrepreneurs who we think are great, at least to start with, those are the ones we really take notice of. I think then, the way that Mustard Seed works, it's really not built on the democracy inside, it's built on trust. Within the firm, it's built on, I may not agree with you, but I trust you. So that's the key here, is within the firm, we really look to build an investment case, but one that may be contrarian within the firm and actioning that. Negotiation, as I touched on, was really a key point that we try and be as founder-friendly as possible. We feel that you would be unable to attract the type of top-quality investors by being aggressive, and we've definitely seen that for firms and angels, actually, within London. Those sort of very aggressive term sheets is not being picked up by venture anymore. And finally, the due diligence and execution. But I think for us, it's actually post-investment when the real work begins. It's the power of the network. It's making the strategic introductions that can really make that difference to our portfolio companies, being able to secure those strategic partners, being able to really, really make a difference. I think it's talent identification. For us, venture is all about recruitment. Being able to have the best talent in the right seats is a really key part, and that comes out of our university pitching events. being able to find that top talent from Stanford to LBS to Oxford and place those into our portfolio companies is a really key part of our investment philosophy. And finally, hands-on consulting. We take the view of being a partner, not an investor in our businesses. And through using both of those, we really feel that we're able to deliver an outsized return for our companies, being able to really make a difference to them and make a difference to society as a whole. So I guess on that note, I'll open up for questions.
Fantastic. So before we hear from one or two of the startups, do we have any questions for Orson? That was quite an insightful presentation. I would certainly echo the point that more and more accelerators look for investors who can add more than just money. In fact, I would say certainly of the startups that I've been involved with over the past 5 or 6 years, the ones that have definitely done the best are where the investor has taken an active interest in the running of that company in terms of making sure they attend the monthly board meetings and actually offer real expertise or route to customers or route to networks or introductions, as well as just the initial cash that they can. So I very much endorse that point. Kim?
I don't know if you were here the other day. You heard Joanna from Telenor Accelerator. And what I was really surprised with them is they're investing in things I would never, ever think a telco would invest in. Okay, and one of them, and she didn't present it here, they have a mobile app for women's clothing and other things. So I guess my question to you is, do you have any special focus, or it's just evaluating the ideas that come in and saying, okay, is this market, they could do something that's...
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, we look for companies that actually delivering a social outcome, I think, is really the key here. So we don't think that you need to do bad to do good. We think that doing good can actually mean you do really good. So we look for businesses where that alignment between profit and purpose is evident. So we can look at businesses that reduce food waste, for example, in companies is a big one. We look at companies which are delivering key education solutions. We look at companies that are delivering really revolutionary care in the healthcare space. So that's I guess our focus there. I mean, I think if we tried to drill deeper into that and we became very sector specific, I think we would miss some of the more exciting companies and maybe miss those positive social outcomes.
Thank you.
I just want to pick up on something that those of you at Google the other night will have picked up, in terms of where to invest or what to invest in. And I think it came out in Mike Malore from the CMI's presentation that, I think the number 2 criteria was the team or the people who are behind the business. And I can honestly say I've invested in about 5 or 6 startups, ranging from everything from Mexican food to logistics to local information, basically. So a complete range a diverse range of businesses. But one thing that links all of them is the passion of the person behind the business. And there is nothing that turns on an investor more than a business owner who really believes in what they're doing and they've got a passion to execute and succeed. So I would add that. So
sorry, there's just one question.
Oh, sorry, we have a question? Sorry, Philippe.
We come from Asia. In Hong Kong, the Hong Kong government is actually spending a lot of money with the startups and actually have a huge budget for supporting the startups in Hong Kong and that region. My question is, does in England or in London or do the authorities here, the government, partner with the private? In Hong Kong, they have a scheme where they probably give facility space because it's tight in Hong Kong. They give sort of 30,000 Hong Kong dollars as a startup, lost funds, and then there is a second stage and a third stage, which is organized. Here, I listen to your private company, obviously. Do you partner with the government or with London authorities on these kind of schemes?
So I would say that the government is increasingly looking at the private sort of startup space for some of their solutions. So we're seeing stuff, for example, coming out of the Treasury, where they are launching first loss funds that the government will take to solve solutions. So they did one recently, which was Alzheimer's care. So that is something that we're increasingly seeing, that they are looking for, they will put the first loss position in, partner with industry, and then look for private managers to actually run that. In terms of space, there are a few of those around, but it's not quite as formalized as what you spoke about in Hong Kong.
Yeah, and there's actually quite a few accelerators here that will not only just make an initial investment in the company, Wire being a good example, where typically if you win a place at Wire, you get a €40,000 initial investment in the company, plus you also get 6 months rent-free in their Accelerator Academy in the West End, which 6 months rent-free office space in central London is probably worth probably worth a fair bit. Interesting enough, talking about Asia Pacific, I actually helped Telstra in Australia launch their accelerator, Miru-D, 3 years ago, and that has already proved to be so successful that they've just this year, about a month or so ago, opened up their latest accelerator in Singapore, of all places. And one of the major reasons why they did it was to stop Australian graduates with tech graduates flying across the Pacific to Silicon Valley and trying to keep them in the Asia Pacific region. So there's a lot of corporate money going behind this whole space. John, we heard a lot of talk about John Lewis over the last few days. They actually have their own accelerator space here in London called J Labs, which is a phenomenal space to go. So it's so you see a really old bricks and mortar retail business investing heavily in tech startups.